I really am worried about this slippery slope business. I understand the dilemmas. Believe me, I've spent enough time elsewhere in the world to understand how arrogant Americans can be in the way that creates resentment. Yet there is something profoundly influential about the First Amendment and the kind of rights that it has protected. And I'm worried about this slippery slope thing. Is it possible for us to avoid it?
I think Krishana made a real good point. I was thinking about Pandora's box when you said that, and it's like the internet and that whole cyberspace thing. You can say anything, you can do anything, and it can go everywhere. It's not like you send a letter to a friend in China and that person, it goes everywhere. And there are always people who are more easily incited. There are always people who are looking for excuses. And there are always people who will just do anything. They don't understand that all money is not good money. This filmmaker expected to make some money off this trailer. He felt like, I'm in America, and you said that.
I believe he's an Egyptian, isn't he?
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
And so, you even have to think about the possible subterfuge involved in creating this kind of reaction. What was his intent?
We're at a point where there's a different generation. And so the whole thing about privacy and free speech with the internet, I mean, it's one click away. You could send, I used to have to write a note and pass it to my friend and hope I remember to take it out of my jeans. Now I can, they text and then forward it to their whole list in less than 30 seconds.
I accidentally sent one of those emails that goes to every person in the
Right,
company. And it wasn't the most positive.
Good.
No, it was me making some insightful statements, some of which people said. One person sent me back the picture of the student at Tiananmen Square standing in front of the tank.
Okay. Is that you, David?
Huh?
That you?
That was me. Yeah. So I know.
This whole idea is curious. The Constitution was written near the end of the 18th century. I've had this conversation with political scientist friends and with attorney friends and with generally politically active friends, and I've often said, you know what? We're still trying to make an 18th century set of 18th century Enlightenment concepts work for us. Is that the problem?
I don't think so. I think that
No,
the concepts are applicable to our life today. I think that's what's the great thing about the document.
But if that's the case, then how the heck do you square that circle? You got that problem with the rest, as Krishana points out, the rest of the world is going to watch, and they're not necessarily going to approve.
Well, we don't necessarily approve of what they do either.
I think there are certain, there's certain inalienable rights.
How in the heck do you build a nation or a culture on the basis of trust? That's a hard thing to legislate.
We already did.
Well, and the problem with the trust issue is that, the public opinion will show that most citizens are very distrustful of government. But a lot of times what I try to emphasize is that in a democracy, we are the government. And so what happens is if you're distrustful of your government, then we have ways that we need to get government officials out and put people in. However, we have not quite figured out a better model. And so there are issues knowing how to get people politically active, getting people politically involved, being able to put different types of individuals in power.
Being able to vote on the internet.
Be able to vote on the internet.
Yeah.
Oh.
But to be able to run a campaign without having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, that limits who's going to be able to run for office.
That's right.
And when we look at the people that we
Millions, I think, was the number you were thinking.
Yes. Okay. And when you look at Congress, when you look at them in reflection of being descriptively representative of the American population, they are not. So then you ask yourself, how do we get to a point where our legislators are reflective of the population that they're making legislation for? And so a lot of that distrust, how do you trust somebody to make healthcare laws that have always had healthcare? How do you trust somebody to make laws and policies pertaining to education that have always been educated by the best? How do you trust people to make agriculture policies who have never been to a farm? And so what we need is a more diverse group. We need people up there that have more of a background, no offense, than being a lawyer or a politician. We need people up there that have
people.
Right. We need service workers. We need police officers. We need teachers.
The Congress of the United States is not reflective of the demographics.
Well, that's interesting. The Congress. I read somewhere that if Congress was as big as the ratios at the beginning of the country were called. It would be like a couple of thousand
There'd be
people
thousands.
in.
Well, wait a minute. Let's not get that
So have
complicated.
events
Well, that's-
No, let's
overtaken
talk
us?
about gerrymandering on state levels
Oh,
that
another
really
program for that one.
disenfranchise people by virtue of drawing districts that make it impossible
Issue
for them.
2.
Okay. That being said, you
But
understand.
if they were homogeneous type of the districts, you would still wind up generally with Caucasian representatives.
If we
I mean, that would
really
just-
believe
because
that
Caucasians
all,
are in the majority.
well,
for-
but if
for
we,
now.
Which is true, but then when
but
you
you're
look
not
at this-
supposed to just vote for someone because they're
we
Caucasian.
don't have
I
a lot
know
of,
that.
We don't have a lot of women either.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah,
vote for
but
somebody.
you know what I'm saying.
No,
the other
but-
side of
so,
the
Yeah.
sky.
so Caucasians may be in the majority, but what about the underrepresentation of women in Congress?
I just think that if people would just stop and try to do the right thing.
Well, there we go.
What
Well,
happened
we're
to
with you.
asking yourself, is this the right thing to do? Now, I'm not talking about creating a whole scenario wherein you can justify your action because we know that's true. I'm talking about the very basic moral value. Is this the right thing to do? Would I want it done to me?
Can I sleep at night?
The moral the categorical imperative.
But see, every one of these issues that divides us right now is a spectrum of it's I believe that there's a resentment against people who are on the 47% whatever. There's a resentment. There's a perception that everybody that's over there that's on the take from the government is on the take from the government. That they have no redeeming qualities, whatever. I mean, he didn't really say it that way, but that a lot of people that are on unemployment and welfare and food stamps and all that, they're just not trying.
They're unredeemable.
They're just unredeemable. They're just not trying. Now, there are probably my point has always been, okay, well, let's take the spectrum of people that are on food stamps. Let's examine them, and let's say that maybe 10% of them really shouldn't be there, should be off. Let's enforce the rules. Let's get rid of them. Let's make a big deal out of it.
Here's the difficulty.
But then
there.
let's really focus on the people who are really
Well,
in
here's
need.
the difficulty.
But
You can
instead-
abstract at that level. Sarah and Krishana can abstract at that level. The general population will not abstract at that sophisticated a level, and that's a dilemma. That's a real tough.
Well, when
Well,
we look
there's
at
a
policies,
stereotype,
but
too.
we have
Or that's- it is a total stereotype.
contradictory policies. Then, so on one hand, we look at the people who are on food stamps or who are on welfare, who a lot of times are single parents and
Sure.
single mothers. But then we want to limit access to birth control, and we want to limit access to women's rights to choose, which. To me, we would think that would
You
help
would think
to
you'd want it.
solve the problem.
You'd
and
think-
you would
Yeah.
You'd
want
think that Hillary
that.
Clinton's,
However, you
you
say that,
have
know,
abortions as little as possible.
Yeah, they say
have
don't have any
adoption.
They
abortions.
said you
How
not to
many
have any
children have you
abortions, but then
adopted?
they don't
Safe,
want
legal,
you-
and rare.
But they don't
Yeah,
want you on food
formulation.
stamps. They don't want to give you any government assistance. They
I
don't
know.
want to give you
Well,
any
that's-
programming.
and that's-
They don't want to provide birth control in schools.
And that, what I guess
But they wanna
our
sell sex
liberal
on the
question is, well,
internet.
why don't they examine that dilemma that they've created, this inconsistency, this irony.
We're
And the problem with the reason that
going to go to the
we
second
don't want
show.